people and their careers, often you end up working with folks who feel stuck. What leads to people feeling stuck in their careers?
Many times I really believe it's not having a plan. If you don't have a plan to take yourself to the next level, it's very easy to get stuck in your career. Not knowing what your next move is, not understanding what your own skills and strengths are and how those manifest in the workplace. A lot of times people can find themselves being underemployed or unappreciated because they have no idea. They're essentially treating jobs like old boyfriends, girlfriends, romantic partners, and that they're just like, they keep on going to the next. They get a little bored. They go to the next. They go to the next, hoping that will get better and better and better, but it never really does if you don't have a plan in place to make strategic career moves.
Okay. Well, then when it comes to forming that plan, where do you recommend we start?
So the first step is really understanding your own skill set and your strengths. I like to have folks who work with me go through a full assessment of all of their strengths, all of their opportunities, all of their weaknesses, their gaps, and really get clear on what are the skills that they've gained from every single job that they've had. Every single job. So that long resume that no one really ever looks at, the one you probably can't even send to anyone that has every job on there, and literally look back and say, like, what have you learned? What are your strengths? What are the things you want to continue to use? And what are the things that you no longer want to use? And how can we start to build a career based upon your strengths? And if you don't have the strengths you need to get to the next area, what are the things that we need to work on? What are the gaps that we need to attack in order to make your next move?
Okay. And so you mentioned full assessment. What are some of the key, tools or resources or questions or things folks work through to get that picture?
So the assessment really begins with you. Where are you? What have you done? What are the key skills you've gained from all of your jobs? What is the feedback that you've consistently been receiving from leaders? And if you don't have that feedback, we walk through how to get that feedback using a simple start, stop, continue exercise with people in your industry and people who've worked with you. Of course, there are traditional assessments we can do. I'm a big fan of StrengthsFinder or Strengths Profile by Capfinity. Those are also great as well. But I want the baseline to always be the experiences, because generally where you've gained your experiences, how you've gained your experiences, what you're taking away in terms of skill sets and strengths, that's the baseline for you making your next move. So the assessment really focuses on where you've been and what you've learned.
Ooh, it feels cool.
Now, you talk about how to get that feedback. So start, stop, continue is a good way to organize the conversation. But how do you recommend folks specifically say, hey, tell me what I should start, stop, and continue doing? Or how do you recommend broaching that?
So I always recommend finding time to have career conversations with your management. Many times folks have one-on-ones, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or team meetings, and those are focused on doing the work. But career conversations are a little bit different. So I always recommend that people reach out to their leader and ask, hey, I'd love to have a one-on-one with you, but focused on my career. And ask them simple questions like, what is it that I should continue to do in my role? What are you seeing as good skill sets that I'm building? What do I need to stop doing? What is going to prevent me from moving to the next level? And what do you need to see more of? And the big question I always ask for folks who are thinking about making their next move before it's time for them to make their next move is the big question of, what do you need to see from me in order to know that I'm ready to get to the next level? I'm ready to make the next move. So that you're not asking that question when you're already applying for the new job. You want to ask that question well before it's time for you to have to apply.
That is a fine question. And yeah, as I imagine that scenario, I think there's probably any number of unsatisfying answers you might get, like, oh, you're great, just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, the fan favorite.
That's not helpful.
No, not at all.
So yeah, how do you recommend pushing or digging a little more?
No, 100%. Just like you said, that is the age old, oh my gosh, you're fabulous. Things are great. In time. It's like, no, if you're not getting good feedback from your leader, I recommend asking other folks, asking your peers, asking other people who've also been promoted and sharing your experiences so they can share a little bit more insight on what it takes to move to that next level. And then also honestly having a candid conversation and advocating for yourself. Like, thank you so much. I love hearing that you think I'm doing really, really well. However, I want to make sure that I can be extremely planful, that I actually have a plan Is there any direct feedback that you'd be able to provide me on like, what is it that means that I'm doing really well? How do you know that I'm doing really well? What are the indicators for that? Or even if you could call out someone else, like I saw that Jill got promoted last year into a similar role. What was it that made you know that Jill was ready? Try and push back to advocate for yourself just a little bit more, because feedback is hard. It's very hard. Leaders don't like it. Employees don't like it. So it's really pushing the needle. And if they say that they need a little bit of time to think about it, make sure you circle back and push again.
What are some of the key indicators that it may indeed be appropriate to move on and out from a current role or organization?
So I'm really big on role mastery and impact. So when you have essentially mastered your role, when you are doing things with ease, when people are asking you for assistance because you know that you have it down, when you've built relationships in your role, I always talk about 4 key relationships that you need. So you have great peers that you've networked with. You have teachers who can help you if you need help, or sometimes people call them coaches, and you have mentors and you have sponsorships. You have those 4 key relationships. If you know where your role fits within an organization, like what does your role do? Every role has a purpose in helping the company reach some type of milestone, even if you feel like it's a small piece. Like there's a reason why that role was hired. Once you really know those things and you could think about what is the value you contributed to that role, have you been able to innovate? Have you been able to move the needle? Once you've been able to do some of those things, then it's time to start thinking like, okay, well, I think it's time I start exploring whatever the next move is in this role, whether it's internal to the company or external.
And then if we are looking to transition away, what are some of the most common mistakes you see?
The most common mistakes I see are people relying on the amount of time that they've been at the company. Many times people are like, oh, well, I've been here a year, or, I've been here 2 years. It's time for me. And it's like, no, there's people who've been in roles for 10 years who still aren't ready. The reality is like you have to make an impact. You have to articulate value and what you're going to do moving into that area. And I'm not sure what your feedback is on what I'm about to say next, but I think that many times people want to not do a teach more work to showcase that they're ready for the next role, especially for folks who are moving internally, right? They're a manager, want to be a director, an analyst, want to be a manager, whatever it is. But what I explain to folks is that in your role, you're essentially in a box. Like this is the role of the manager. You're doing everything that needs to be done within this box. When you're ready to move to the next box of the director, you have to showcase that you're ready to leave that box to go to the next level. And in order to showcase that, you almost have to show people like a little bit, give them a touch of what they'll see from you as a director. And it's important that you start doing a few of those things, making sure that you're aligning more to a director role than you are to a manager role, so people can literally see you in it. A lot of times when there's a job search that's happening, I used to work in talent acquisition as well. And when you have someone who is internal applying to a job and you have someone also who's external, the internal person, you've essentially been on the longest interview of your life. They see you every single day. They know you. And if they have questions like, well, why didn't so-and-so start doing this already? Well, I really don't see them doing this. Like they're doing so well in their current role, versus an external person can come in and just sell them the world because they don't know them. They've never seen their work and they can easily align to that director role. So I think it's really important that when you're thinking about moving, you start thinking a little bit more on the level you'd like to be on versus the level that you're currently at.
Absolutely. And well, if you wanted my feedback on what you said with the regard to doing a touch more work, I think that's the right answer to advance in your career. But I think it's also true. What you've said is that a lot of people don't want to do it yet because like, well, I'm not getting paid for that. I don't have the title. It's like, they're not paying me to do that. So it's unfair or not justified in the give and take relationship between me and employer to do that while being paid. what I'm currently paid. But what I've seen is that frequently your fastest movers and shakers are already doing the next job, and the promotion is kind of a formality. Like, hey, you're already doing this. We'd be embarrassed if we didn't give you, the title or the raise, promotion, et cetera, associated with that. And so then when it comes to the networking world, you've got some perspective on identifying power players. And can you tell us, how do we find them and build great relationships with them?
So in every industry, I strongly believe that there are power players. There are people who are at the head of the curve, the people who are the key stakeholders who everyone listens to. There's always a few key people that are great to really look at as sponsors in your network. So the way I always try to identify them are looking at professional associations. Who's speaking at the conferences? If you're at the conferences, virtual or in person, whose room is packed out every single time? Who is it that has your boss's ear or your skip leader? Who's the person who really has the power to make the decisions and you see being frequently called upon? Those are what I call power players, the people where business doesn't happen unless you hear from them first, or they have a significant influence over whatever is happening in the workplace. When we're talking about power players, one of the key words there is influence. Same thing with sponsors. They have to be able to influence and impact change. Otherwise, they really aren't a power player in the industry. So when you start seeing people speaking at events or people always tapping that person, that person has power in the workplace. And my key is always finding a way to get in the room with them. How can you get as close as possible? Again, virtual or in person. I think you could still do it virtually. In some respects, virtual can even be a little bit easier than trying to navigate yourself into a room in person. But find a way to get in the room, and whether it's interacting with that individual at the event, even as simple as asking a really great question or being super active in the virtual chat. Find a way to get involved with that power player and initiate some time, whether it's a 15-minute meeting to introduce yourself, learn more about them, or attending quite a few events. If I'm very honest, there are some people who I have a relationship with now where it took me years to build the relationship. It wasn't one time to get on their radar. It was multiple events, multiple things before I reached out and got any individual time with that person. I think especially when you're looking for someone who has influence, it's going to take some time. It's not going to be a quick 1, 2, 3. The first time you try, you hear back. And if you can't get in touch with that person, I recommend also looking at who's around them. So let's say there is a senior SVP in your workplace and you want to get in touch with them, but you have not had any luck on getting on their calendar. Well, then who are their direct reports? Let's see if we can get in contact with them and work your way around. So next time when you try, you already have some relationships that are close and someone else who can refer you or make an introduction. Sometimes it takes a little bit more time to get that power player.
How do you yourself become such a power player?
Again, I think that's so much about impact and value. It's about being a subject matter expert, being the SME in your area. Many times people believe that leaders have to have this big title. They have to be the SVP, the director, the super long title that is confusing and you can barely say it yourself. But I really believe that everybody has the ability to be a leader. You are hired for any particular role. That role has tasks and responsibilities. Regardless of your seniority, you need to be the subject matter expert for your role. Nobody needs to do that role better than you are doing that role. You have to lead in that role. When you are leading in your role, so you've mastered it, you are the person who they come to for questions or concerns. You have networked yourself appropriately, so people also know that you are the best at that role. You're not just, behind closed doors or in your virtual office, not speaking to anyone. That's really how you can start positioning yourself as the go-to person and ultimately positioning yourself as a leader or the power player in your area. And also having that strategy. So knowing what's next, which means having some of those tough career conversations, even if your leader isn't giving you what you need, making sure that you push forward or find someone else who can give you that feedback. Having that strategy so you can continuously be evolving your career and moving to the next level, that will slowly but surely be able to position you. And, for some folks, it takes time. For me, even thinking about my own career, for a long time, my goal was to be a director of career services in higher education. I spent nearly 10 years in career services offices working with people 18 who don't know what they want to do with their entire life to people who are in their 60s who want to use all their experience and use that to kind of launch into something that just makes them happy in the world of work. And I wanted to just be a director of career services running a large office. That was it. And I knew that in order to move to the next level, this wasn't an arena where I'd be able to stay in one office unless I wanted to stay in one office for like 10 to 15 years to slowly work my way up. So every 2 years, I made sure I knew what my next move was. I understood the skills that I needed to gain with each strategic move in order to build a career for myself and also increase my influence. I participated in conferences. I spoke at conferences. I always made sure I was able to level up in my career. And ultimately, I did not get that director of career services job, but I became a director in a global Fortune 100 company in financial services, leading some of their diversity, talent acquisition, recruitment efforts. So you just have to make sure that you're continuously leveling up and having a strategy for yourself.